So we're going to start off. I have the do now posted. I have a 5-minute timer also on the screen that I'm sharing. I'll allow you guys to unmute yourselves. Can you just type on number 1 in the chat box if you can see my screen? Superb. Okay, so one of the issues that I'm finding is that we never actually went over the process of writing an effective hypothesis. All right, so we are going to address that today. All right, just to show of hands, can you type a 2 in the chat window if you have already started researching your data? Type a 2 if you've already started your research. All right, let's go the other way. Can you type a 0 if you really have not done much outside the hypothesis? Okay. Okay, so we're looking at probably a little bit more than half have not started, it looks like. A little bit less than half have not started the assignment. So what you guys are going to do now, I'm going to start this 5-minute clock. I'm going to start this 5-minute timer. And what I want to do is I want you guys to go into this do now, short and sweet hypothesis. I want you guys to take the hypothesis that you wrote and posted yesterday. And what I want you guys to do is take that hypothesis, okay? Take that hypothesis you already wrote, read the elements of a hypothesis here. I believe there's 6 bullet points here. And I want you just to condense and shorten yours. And then repost your new hypothesis in this area. You've got about 4 minutes. After that, we'll go over it. All right, so I'm just going to mute myself for about 4 minutes. Do the April 7 do now. If you already did it, you're ahead of the game. If you did not do it yet, copy your hypothesis from last night, paste it there, and then after looking at the 6 bullets, start to condense and shorten your hypothesis to make it much shorter and sweeter and more concise. All right? All right, I'm going to mute myself for the next 4 minutes. Okay. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to actually take a look at the actual hypothesis writing process. Okay, so one of the issues that I was having yesterday is that I was getting hypotheses that sounded like introductory paragraphs. I was getting hypotheses that would take you literally 3 minutes to read like 10 to 12 sentences. Then I was getting some hypothesis with so much data that it sounded like it was part of your presentation. So to shortchange the goal of the hypothesis, it should be just enough to get the listeners' feet wet. As soon as you can get their feet wet, the goal is that they ask additional questions and they want to read the rest of your study. If you give them too much upfront in terms of data, or too much upfront in terms of there's too much information to sift through, you will lose them. So imagine you're in an elevator or you post it on Twitter. If it's not easy and concise to comprehend, the conversation will not continue. So imagine we're trying to get you guys on CNBC, on CNN, on MSNBC, on Bloomberg Radio, right? To discuss your topic. The only effective way we can get you on there is if you can put together a hypothesis that is so simple to comprehend that their viewers will want to listen. After you have them hooked, you can dive deep into data, right? You can dive deep into explanations. You can give those relationships and how they are impacted. Okay? So first, a proper hypothesis is a proposed explanation with limited evidence. It is a starting point. So you get on TV, they bring you on TV because you gave them this hypothesis. Based on the Federal Reserve and the government's intervention, we see the stock market at all-time highs by Thanksgiving of 2020. Well, you bet your ass they're going to want you on TV. They want you to defend that position, support that position. You can then talk about the corporate bailouts. You can talk about the Paycheck Protection Program. You can talk about student debt. You can talk about credit card debt. You can talk about low interest rates. You can talk about the federal funds rate. You can talk about anything. You can even talk about corporate debt and it not being a risk. You can talk about earnings. You can talk about the unhealthy consumer that will all of a sudden become healthy because of these checks that are being sent out. That's where your data comes into play. As of today, you would not want to give them a huge in-depth hypothesis with your explanation already. Imagine that's how someone steals your idea. Okay? So it's a brief explanation addressing the relationship with limited evidence. And then this is your starting point for a much deeper investigation or a much deeper conversation. Okay? So, Emery, can you read number 2 for everybody, please?
It does not need to be an if-then relationship, but the statement must prove that there is a relationship between 2 or more variables. In your situation, your variables are 1, key factors in the economy, and 2, what you predict will happen as a result.
Good. So it doesn't have to be if this happens, then this happens. It doesn't have to be an if-then specific relationship. So it's not if you do this, this will happen. It doesn't have to be like that, all right? So most of your theses are still okay to use. They're just too lengthy. Now, it has to show the relationship. So who else do we have? Let's go with Daniel, what are the key factors? What is your number one? What is your key factor variables?
Mine, I'm changing to MBSs.
Okay, so mortgage-backed securities is one of your key factors. Do you have a second key factor you're addressing or just one?
Leverage loans.
Leverage loans. So your two key factors are mortgage-backed securities and leverage loans. What do you think is your prediction of the future based on what you should anticipate finding? What is your prediction?
My prediction is in 6 to 12 months, we're going to go into a recession that's worse than the 2009 one.
Damn, you are so negative. So this gets Daniel on TV, right? He's coming out and giving your two key topics, mortgage-backed securities and leverage loans. They will drive the economy into a recession worse than 2008. Now, the later conversation goes into, well, do the mortgage-backed securities turn into bankruptcies? Do the mortgage-backed securities result in consumers, individual owners losing their homes? Does the leverage debt affect only those companies with real serious leverage, right? So Microsoft, the Apples, the Googles with real cash flow are healthy, and it's the companies like a Netflix and Tesla that's at risk here. This is data that comes later. Okay? Does that make sense for you guys? Frida, what are your key factors?
I think right now I might switch it to the currency exchange rate and corporate debt instead of what I had before.
Okay, so currency exchange you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, and what is your prediction?
My prediction is that the corporate debt rate that we have right now will affect the U.S. currency and that it will weaken it during 2020.
Okay, so based on the bailouts, Frida is seeing the US dollar weakening, which then I would say is a domino effect. So her first key factor might be currency, and then I guess you might say US debt or the Federal Reserve printing money, because that's going to be what really devalues the currency. So there's your two key factors, right? Is currency exchange, and what really impacts currency exchange is the Fed printing money. So there's your two key factors, Frida. What happens? You then see, the dollar get weaker, which has a major impact on X, Y, and Z companies or the economy. Now her data she finds would be which companies are most likely to be impacted by a weaker dollar. And then what happens to those businesses, right? And what happens in the next 6 to 12 months. So I just feel like a lot of you guys were giving me as much information as you can when that's not really what you want to do. You want to give as minimal information if you can. So if you see me as a talking head on CNBC, and I'm, is Marcus here? Marcus. No, I think Marcus has class. So I spoke to Marcus yesterday, and Marcus's whole concept is that mortgage-backed securities in the next few months will be the greatest investment opportunity of the year. That's part of his argument, right? His data will prove or disprove that. But his argument is going to be that mortgage-backed securities have been so risky, and the Fed came in and bought so much of this bad debt that once we start to recover, since the housing market is currently closed, banks will start issuing more personal mortgages, which will lead to more risky mortgages, which will lead to riskier mortgage-backed securities, which will lead to higher yield, which will lead it to being the best investment opportunity of the year. Right? So if your hypothesis is too general, I'd focus in on what are your key factors and what's the prediction. Correct, Emery. If your thesis is too big and you have too much information, well, that's a very different discussion we can have. If you have too much information, you have to narrow it all down. And then after you narrow it down, right, then the stuff you pulled out would probably be the data you're going to input.
Mr. Powers, so I have to rewrite mine then because it's just too general. Do I still have to text it to you to get approval again?
No, so we've already discussed yours. You already discussed yours here. If you think it's too general, you guys can just update it now. However, I want you to update it in April 7th. Do not update, again, your previous corporate debt assignment. So do not update the corporate debt activity 2 assignment. You've already completed that. You're already getting credit for that. Your new revised thesis should be for your April 7th due now.
Okay.
All right, that you have to finish today. That all you guys have to relook at and then refinish today. Okay. So number 3, let's go with Prasanga. Can you read number 3? Okay, let's skip over Prasanga. Nate, can you read number 3?
Your hypothesis should not have more than 1 or 2 data points and should not have data that is difficult to find and needs thorough research. A hypothesis is a proposed explanation with limited evidence. Leave your thorough research for actually supporting or disproving your hypothesis.
Good. It's okay to have 1 to 2 data points. I'd more so lean towards 1 in your hypothesis, but you shouldn't be layering it. Okay? So it should be a very simple, straightforward, very limited evidence, very limited data. This is what will hook your audience. Once they're hooked, you can give your whole thesis and presentation on this is what's going to happen now. Okay? That's what you are going to leave all that in-depth data for. Initially, 1 or 2 major data points. So, like, let's take Daniels. Mortgage-backed securities in 2008 caused the fastest decline in the stock market in history. Okay, there's your 1 data point. 2020 will face the worst decline in history, larger than 2008, as a result of mortgage-backed security debt. So you can have a data point. But if Daniel started going off on mortgage-backed securities in 2008 and then mortgage-backed security debt in 2020 and which banks have the biggest debt and how much debt is outstanding, well, then you're writing me an essay, right? Your hypothesis is not an essay. And that's what a lot of you guys were doing. A lot of you guys were giving me 10 sentences, 12 sentences, 5 sentences, but all 5 of them were run-ons with 2 commas in each sentence, which might as well be 10 to 12 sentences. So you've really got to elite this up, okay? Your hypothesis is tentative. Why is your hypothesis tentative? Why would you say your hypothesis is tentative?
We don't have enough data to prove whether it's right or wrong.
Well, it's tentative today.
Right, today.
Today it's tentative.
Mm-hmm.
In general, your whole presentation is tentative because you're not going to know whether your hypothesis is proven or not until you're done. So it's tentative, meaning that it can change. So I can tell you today, guys, buy as much stocks as you can. My thesis is, you know, this is the best investment time you'll ever find in the next 10 years. Right? That would be my hypothesis. I can then go in and look at historical data and do my research. And then I realize, well, wait a minute. Historically speaking, it's actually going to get worse in 3 months than it is today. So today's not the best day to buy stocks based on all my research. So my hypothesis was tentative. I gave you an argument and I was dead wrong. Okay, so my thesis is tentative in the fact that it can change. It can be proven or disproven with quantitative and qualitative data. So this is what you need: qualitative and quantitative data. Anybody know the difference? Quants versus qual.
Quant is numbers.
Which one's numbers, Daniel?
Quantitative.
Quantity. Yes, it's measurable. That's the key word you guys have to know. You can measure quantitative data. In financing, it would be called quants. In statistics, they would call it quants. In investing, you'd call it quants, quantitative analysis. All about numbers. That is all. What does the data say? Data can be measured. Data deals with strictly numbers. Data deals with quantity. Okay? Data is concrete. All right? It's numerical. The one thing about quantitative data, though, is what else? What is the one key thing to know about quantitative data? There's like one huge key factor we have to realize about quantitative data. It is what? We can only have data because what happened?
Historical data.
Why is it historical? Why is quant historical? Sabrina, Serena, Mary, why is it historical? Don't all jump at once. Why is quantitative data historical? Ethan, go ahead.
So it's historical because it's already happened. So numbers come from what has already happened in the world.
100%. Your numbers come from what have happened. You can try to use historical data to make a best guess about the future. But quantitative data is an educated guess. Well, sorry. Quantitative data helps you make an educated guess because you look at what has happened in the past. Unemployment rates, quantitative, right? Payroll, quantitative. The stock market moving, quantitative. It's all happened already. You can try to chart it and project it and model it out for the future, but this is quantitative data. Okay? What would you then consider is qualitative? And if you say quality, I'm going to throw my coffee against the wall. What would you say is qualitative? Give me an example, maybe. Yes, it's not quantity. It is quality, yes. But what does that mean? Qualitative. How about you just put a 0 if you don't know instead of me waiting?
Actually, can't you say qualitative is like saying how it's like backed up by a reliable source?
You could. So Tasneem's got it. Observations and interviews. Things that you observe. Right? It deals with descriptions, quality. So it deals more specifically with descriptions of something. So qualitative research would be looking for trends and after finding a trend, trying to understand what is the insight behind the trend. Right? So the quantitative data gives you the numbers. The qualitative side is trying to rationalize them. It's observing certain things. So let's do it this way. Quantitative data would be Starbucks processed $4 million worth of sales on Tuesday. Quantitative. Qualitative, driving past Starbucks, there is a huge line of cars waiting to purchase and not go inside. Right? So you're observing what's happening. It's probably not necessarily quantitative, but you can make an educated guess based on what you observe. There's no statistics. All right? So it's not a number. Temperature would be the number. Right? Quantitative, it's 80 degrees outside. Qualitative, it's hot outside. Quantitative, Ethan is 6'2". Qualitative, Ethan is taller than most students at Francis Lewis High School. Quantitative, 20% of students will likely fail as a result of not being able to, nope, that's not that would be, so quantitative would be 80% of students will pass because 20% of the students have not submitted more than 90% of their work. Quantitative. Qualitative would then be students that fail don't care about their education. Students that fail are not time managing in order to submit work on time. Students that fail are not watching the Zoom lessons. All right? Whereas 85% of our students have watched the Zoom lessons. That's quantitative. Qualitative would be students that are not performing are not watching the live sessions. Okay? So quantitative and qualitative, what do you think your presentation's made up of? What percentage? Give me a percentage that you feel for your personal hypothesis. Give me a percentage. Can I get a percentage?
Can
50% quantitative and 50% qualitative. Because
Okay.
I don't think you can just like add a stat and then not explain it. You have to add a statistic and then like explain it.
Okay. So William's giving me 50-50. 50 data, 50 observation, 50 thoughts, 50 numbers. What else? Daniel, did you have your mic unmuted too? Ethan says 60-40. 60 quantitative, Ethan? 60 for QT? All right, so we'll do QT, QL. So we got a 60-40. Can I get a 70-30? Whoops. Anybody want to give me a 70-30? 75-25? 75-25, 75-25, 70-30, 70-30. Can I get an 80-20, 80-20, 80-20? Anybody want to give me 80-20? 80% quantitative, 80% quantitative. Can I get 100% quantitative? Can somebody give me 100% quantitative? Who's hitting me with 0 qualitative data? I don't care about your observations or your interviews. I'm 100% a numbers guy. You're strictly looking at the balance sheet, right? Suban, where are you at? Zebin, where are you at? 100% data and numbers. 0% qualitative. Anybody want to take that leap of faith? Ham's going 70-30. Daniel and Mary are going 75-25. All right, so 75-25 is our lowest. No one's going to give me my 80-20, huh? No one's going to give me my 100%? Oh, man, I was hoping for 100. Shannon, can I get 100 to 0? Does anyone, what if I told you I challenge you to do your presentation with 100% quantitative data and 0% qualitative? What if I challenged you to do that? Who would take that challenge? And then what if I told someone the opposite? What if I told you who would take 100% qualitative data? No quantitative. Anybody willing to take that? Now, 100%, I mean, see if it'll work, right? Try to sell your thesis with 100% quantitative. And then I want somebody, so Ham said he'll do 100% quantitative. Can I get somebody to do just 100% qualitative? Can I get a 100% strictly, solely qualitative? Nada. Man, you guys are whack. I was excited. I was hoping I'd get somebody that tries to do that. Stir the pot a little bit. All right. Qualitative is like your senses. What you see, what you feel, what you hear, what you understand, your reality, your perspective. Quantitative would just be literally rulers and, scales. Okay. It is important to understand the difference because you're going to have to be clear when addressing it. Is your data quantitative or qualitative? So if you made it onto television, right? Could you tell them what is QT and what is QL? You'd have to be able to do that. What is opinion? What is numerical fact? You've got to be able to do that. In the coming days, I will likely, when you present your presentation, when you provide it, I will have you go in and put a little QT and a little QL next to your quantitative or qualitative data. I will more than likely do that. So just keep that in the back of your mind. So there's your short and sweet hypothesis. Simple, direct, clear. Are there any questions on your hypotheses? All right, this should help you guys kind of hone them down a little bit and kind of get a better view on where they belong, right? On how they should be structured. Again, place them April 7th. You'll get credit for the due now, and you'll get credit for your attendance. Now, this leads us to the assignment itself, okay? I'm going to go over a sample assignment from last year, okay? I'm going to go over some of what has been done by previous students. Here's one presentation on corporate debt, okay? Obviously, the presentation title is on corporate debt. I would like it to have been a little bit clearer on what element of corporate debt. So by no means take this to the bank as your foundation of what you should do. This is just a sample, and then you can tell me if you think this is a acceptable or stellar presentation. So their thesis: corporate debt exceeds previous economic crises. However, debt does not mean economic failure. First, grammar and punctuation. There should be a semicolon and a comma here. Debt does not mean economic failure, okay? So from my perspective, they're trying to argue that although corporate debt exceeds previous crises, the debt should not lead to an economic downturn. Okay. Now, what you have to remember when looking at this is that these presentations were given to me and then presented to the class. Okay. So if they were being presented to the class, they don't need all the information on the slide because part of it will be their script. Okay? And if they don't have a script, which you guys will not have because you'll be submitting it, the layout would have to be a little bit different. It's going to have to be a little bit more self-explanatory per slide. So, risk arising in the corporate debt market, total outstanding amount of corporate bond issued by non-financial companies in 1998, 2008, and 2018. This data was good for last year's assignment. It's not good for this year's assignment because you would need 2019 data. 2020 data will not exist. It's only April. But you cannot give me 2018 data, right? You cannot give me data from 2 years ago because there's companies that have issued hundreds of billions of dollars of bonds in just the past 2 weeks, which means your data from 2018 is going to be super outdated. So if you have 2018 data like this, that's fine if you go into Excel or you recreate the chart and you can give me the 2019 data you found. Now you can give me 1998, 2008, 2018, and 2019. Does that make sense? So again, careful the data you accept to use, because if you start using data that is outdated, I'm going to hammer your presentation. Because if you give me anything not from 2019, it is not current. So if you're giving me data from any recession before, you're going to have to either give me projections for this issue, right? Projections, or real data currently. All right. Global outstanding debt from bonds more than doubled from 2008 to 2018. Yes, this is true. And has risen another 10% between 2018 and 2019. That would be the data that I need to prove that 2020 is scary. Again, you probably won't find 2020 data unless you look at a specific business like JetBlue or Apple. Maybe you'll find their specific data, in which case maybe this whole chart means nothing, and you go strictly based on one or two companies. This will take a significant amount of research. Okay, moving on. One thing to avoid over designing your slides, this serves no purpose, neither does this, neither does this, okay? Additionally, this is one idea, this is another idea. More than likely, this should be two separate slides. Right, those should be two separate slides. Good. The reason why this should be separate is because you're going to need to explain with 1, 2, or 3 bullets on why these charts, graphs, or this data is relevant information. You're going to have to prove that it's relevant information. And if you jam things onto one slide, it's not going to be clear because remember, you're submitting this, you're not presenting this. Questions on that yet? Wonderful. Okay. The second thing I have to say is please be cautious on the data you find, the actual data. Make sure you know what you're finding. So what they have here is not a chart that shows the percentage of debt they took out or debt to GDP. It's credit to GDP ratio. Is there an increase in the credit to GDP ratio? Which means your terms, you have to say, are credit and credit to GP ratio. You would have to research the terminology. Does this defend your position? You won't know that unless you do the research on what this is. Know what the chart is telling you. Credit to GP ratio for businesses and individual households. All right, so you have two overlaying where you have businesses, credit to GDP is increasing while households, it is decreasing. So it looks to me like businesses are taking out more credit while individuals are doing it less. Then, bullet, what is the explanation and the reason? Good, so Leslie's question, should we define terms first, then present the data? Do your presentation, okay? Do your whole presentation. You'll understand it. But I would do a layout where your terms come first for someone like me. Because if you want to talk credit to GDP ratio, you can't do that at the end of your presentation because I'm already confused by the time I get to this slide. So I would like to read your terms first. When you design it, I don't really care what you do with it, right? You can do your terms last, you can do your terms first, you can do your terms in the middle. It doesn't make a difference to me. You can do them on a piece of loose leaf and then transfer them over later. You can move slides around. But for me, it would be cover page, hypothesis, terms, third, and then the rest of your presentation. Or cover page, terms, hypothesis, then your data, and the rest of that presentation. But I agree, terms should go either before your hypothesis or just after your hypothesis. If your terms are last, like I have on your rubric, if your terms go last, then by the time people get to your terms, they were already confused about your presentation. They were already confused about this chart and what that chart means. So know your data though, know your charts, understand what you're looking at. This one again, confusing. It's not simple, what percentage of data. This says percent change of real debt of the business sector, not just real debt, but growth of it. So you had growth in debt here. You had growth in debt here. You had growth in debt 2015, 2016. Did you have growth in debt in Q4 2018? Yes, you did. About 2.5%. But it wasn't as much as 2015 or 2017 or 2007 or 1998. Is this data still relevant to your presentation? Possibly. Will you need to continue this chart? Yes, because 2008 is not recent enough. I would need to know 2009, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4 data. But remember, this does not tell you the percentage of debt or the amount of debt. What this tells me is the growth percentage of debt year over year. So the annual rate of change from Q4 2017 to Q4 2018, it increased 2.5%. Q1 2015 from Q1 2014, it increased about 7.7%. Know the data you find. Okay? And I know some of you guys got to go. We'll be done in a few minutes, or you can always leave and I'll post the session. But please know the data. Don't assume the data you found is the data you think it is. You need to kind of try to find out, are you accurate on the data? What are you looking at? Is it what you think you're looking at? Okay, debt to GDP ratio, great chart. However, this is a distraction, and you would need bullets to explain why is this relevant to me, right? You would need to explain why that's relevant. Because as of right now, you're talking about credit to GDP. You talked about loan growth, corporate debt growth year over year. Now you're talking debt to GDP ratio, and I'm not really sure what all these numbers are trying to say to me. So this is where you would have to explain it in your bullets. So William's question is, our data should be shown in charts and graphics. So we can also include data points in sentences like 65% of banks used or sold mortgage-backed securities in 2019. Yes. So you can show me a pie chart of mortgage-backed securities and then give me a bullet point, 65% of banks issued mortgage-backed securities in 2019. Yeah. Yeah. Data should not be just bullets of words. I need pie charts. I need line graphs. I need bar graphs. I need exploded pie charts, right? I need comparisons. I need, greater than or equal to analyses. I need trend lines, right? So you're going to have to find the quantitative and qualitative data. Charts are usually quantitative. So if you're telling me that 70 to 80% of your presentation is quantitative, that means you're also telling me 80% of your presentation is going to be numbers. And you can't just give me numbers in bullet form. You've got to give me numbers in charts, graphs, and trends. Okay, so then we got to balance sheets. You can address balance sheets if you're talking corporate debt, okay? But please know what you're looking at, because these are two separate sheets, and this one is not the balance sheet. This is just giving me a comparison of liabilities over time. So again, this is one, this is two, and they didn't make a clear differentiation between the two, right? So your layout is going to be also as crucial so that somebody can understand what they're being presented and looking at, okay? Now, this is cool because they went from Microsoft to Microsoft's revenue. But how's the revenue really? Like, how did we go all the way from GDP and then to real debt, percentage change? Then we did credit to GDP. Then we did loans to individual companies. Then we did the bond market. Now all of a sudden we're getting over here to Microsoft expenses of liabilities, Microsoft's revenue. Then we talk Amazon's liabilities. Then we're talking their acquisition of Whole Foods in 2017, 2018. I don't see the parallel, right? I don't see where those things all correlate. It's a lot of good data. It seems like good information, but does all the information tie in? I don't think so. Does all the information tell the story? I don't think so. I think a lot of this information is confusing and messily put together, because clearly we jumped around from individual businesses to individual revenues, which we didn't even talk about revenue the whole time. Then we went back to the balance sheet. Then we're talking business sector growth in debt. Then we're talking housing versus business credit to GDP ratios. Then all of a sudden we're starting to talking about the bond market, and it's just very confusing. Does that make sense, guys? If you agree with me that this is a bit confusing, can you type a 1 in your chat box? Okay. So we're all on the same page. So then I go back to the thesis. Corporate debt exceeds previous economic crisis. Okay. Where was that proven? Well, that was proven here. Corporate bond debt. I don't know if it was proven here. So it doesn't look like it was proven here because this is new leverage loans. But although they're new, it doesn't tell me if it's more than it was. You know, although it's new loans in more new leverage loans in 2011 than 2019, you're not telling me if there's more actual debt in 2011 or 2019, right? So you're not telling me that. So this data doesn't really seem to work at all. Then I get to credit to GDP ratio. So you have to find out, is your credit to GDP ratio the same as debt to GDP ratio? Because I think debt is more relevant as a ratio than credit. All right, Tasneem, I know a lot of you guys have other classes. Take off. I will post this. We'll be done in a few minutes. So just please make sure that the data you're finding circles back to your thesis. You might find a lot of data that is cool data, but not effective to have. You might have data you find that is good data to discuss and post online and share and have a conversation about, but doesn't relate to your thesis. You have to be careful about what you include. Okay. Tomorrow's class will be 9:30 for everyone. We'll do some Q&A with your projects that you guys are working on. Do you guys have any questions for me now? I'm hoping that I kind of gave you guys a little bit better vision on one, laying out your thesis, but then two, outside of laying out your thesis, I'm hoping we gave you a better look at the type of data that may or may not work, and then the difference between qualitative and quantitative. Any questions? No questions, no questions. Okay. Guys, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to post this recording within the next 20 minutes. It'll be available. If you have comments or questions, you guys can obviously reach out to me. And then tomorrow, again, we'll go 9:30 till what, 10:30, 11, 11:30, whatever your questions are. You can bring specific questions or general questions about your assignments. Thursday and Friday, we are going to move forward. Tomorrow, a little bit more into your data. Thursday, Friday, we will discuss more into the next thing we'll be working on, which would be mergers, acquisitions, and spinoffs. Okay? Guys, you have a wonderful day. I will share this out. Thank you guys for always being here and being engaged. I will talk to you guys shortly. If you have questions, do not hesitate to message me immediately. All right, guys, have a wonderful day.